What if the most tragic day in sports history was actually the day a legend was solidified? May 4th, 1949, 5:03 p.m. In our timeline, this is the moment Italian football died as a Fiat G212 transport plane carrying the greatest team the world had ever seen slammed into the back of the Superga Basilica. But imagine the pilot, Captain Pierluigi Moroni, catches a break in the clouds just 10 seconds earlier. He sees the runway lights of Air Italia through the grey soup of the Piedmontese fog. The landing gear touches down. The Grande Torino returns home, not as martyrs, but as men. The history books you know are about to be set on fire. In our world, the Superga disaster didn't just kill 31 people. It wiped out an entire era and paved the way for the rise of Real Madrid. But in this safe landing timeline, Valentino Mazzola doesn't become a ghost. He becomes the architect of the first global footballing empire. We aren't just looking at a what-if match. We are simulating a 10-year dynasty that would have fundamentally changed why you love football today. Today, we erase the tragedy and follow the momentum of a machine that refused to stop. To understand how this team would have destroyed the 1950s, you first have to realize they were already living in the 1970s. While the rest of the world was playing rigid, static, and often boring football, Torino was a tactical laboratory. They played Il Sistema, a fluid precursor to total football that focused on collective movement and relentless high pressing. They had won 5 consecutive Scudettos, and their dominance wasn't just a streak. It was a monopoly. Imagine a team so dominant that the national anthem should have been replaced with their club song. In 1947, during a match against Hungary, the Italian national team started a game with 10 Torino players and 1 goalkeeper from Juventus. And they only picked the Juve keeper because Torino's own was slightly injured. Torino was more than a club. They were the backbone of a nation trying to find its soul after the wreckage of World War II. They hadn't lost a home game at the Stadio Philadelphia in nearly 7 years. A run of 100 matches where the opposition didn't just lose, they were dismantled. The safe landing timeline begins with a boardroom masterclass rather than a funeral. It's May 5th, 1949, and instead of a city weeping in the streets, Turin is erupting in cheers as the team parades the 1949 title through the Piazza Castello. While other European giants were still picking up the pieces of a post-war economy, Torino's president, Ferruccio Novo, was running the club like a modern tech corporation. Success breeds money, and in 1949, Torino was the richest club in the world. Without the financial ruin of rebuilding a squad from scratch, Novo continues to scout the globe, buying not just the best players, but the future of the sport. In our world, the death of the Grande Torino created a power vacuum that a certain car manufacturing family was happy to fill. With the Granata gone, the Agnelli family and Juventus seized control of the Italian narrative, turning the old lady into the symbol of Italian industrial might. But in the alternate reality, the Agnellis are constantly playing second fiddle. Torino isn't just a sports team, it's a cultural hegemon that keeps the wealth and the glory on the maroon side of the city. Juventus becomes the other team in Turin, a historical footnote in the shadow of a dynasty that never died. If you're an Italy fan, the 1950s are a dark age, but in this timeline, they are the golden era of the Azzurri. In our reality, the Italian team was so traumatized by the Superga crash that they refused to fly to the 1950 World Cup in Brazil. They took a slow, grueling boat across the Atlantic, training on a cramped deck and arriving seasick. Out of shape and mentally broken, they crashed out in the first round, a shadow of their former selves. The pattern interrupts. Italy doesn't take the boat, they fly to Brazil as the heavy favorites to win it all. The core of the team, Mazzola, Gabetto, Ossola and Loic, are at the absolute zenith of their powers. Valentino Mazzola, the captain, is widely considered the best player in the world, a man who possessed the stamina of a marathon runner and the vision of a grandmaster. In the high-altitude heat of Brazil, Italy's Sistema conditioning allows them to outrun every opponent. They don't just compete, they dominate the Maracanazo Uruguayans in the final group stages, securing Italy's 3rd World Cup title in 1950. By 1954, the world is waiting for the magical Magyars of Hungary. But they've forgotten about the Italian wall. Led by Ferenc Puskás, Hungary was the greatest team many had ever seen in our world. But in the Torino timeline, Italy has spent 5 years perfecting a tactical counter-style to the Hungarian blitz. A veteran Mazzola, now in his mid-30s but still the tactical heartbeat of the team, leads a young, hungry Italian side to the final in Switzerland. We are looking at a reality where Italy could have been the first ever 5-star nation before Pelé was even a teenager. The speed to value here is simple. More trophies equals more prestige, and more prestige equals a different kind of player. Because Italy is winning World Cups, the Italian league becomes the undisputed NBA of football much earlier than it did in the 80s. The world's best talent doesn't dream of Madrid or Barcelona. They dream of the Stadio Philadelphia. The ripple effect of these victories means that the Italian identity is built on winning and attacking, not on the defensive survivalism that would eventually haunt the nation's footballing DNA. Real Madrid's Kings of Europe mythology is built on a foundation of 5 straight European Cups. But that foundation only exists because their biggest competitor was gone. This is the heart of our story. 1955. The birth of the European Cup, the precursor to the UEFA Champions League. In our history, Real Madrid won every trophy from 1956 to 1960, establishing a dominance that carries them to this day. But Madrid won because the Italian representative in those early years was a rebuilding AC Milan, a good team, but they weren't the Invincibles. Imagine the 1956 European Cup final, Alfredo Di Stefano versus Valentino Mazzola. This is the greatest all-around footballing face-off that history never gave us. Di Stefano was the blonde arrow, a man who could be everywhere at once. Mazzola was his equal in every sense, a player who famously would roll up his sleeves when his team was losing to signal that the Torino hour had begun. While Real Madrid relied on the individual magic of Di Stefano and Puskás, Torino relied on a mechanical, relentless synchronization that stifled individual brilliance. In this timeline, Torino wins the 1956 European Cup, breaking the Madrid streak before it even begins. This isn't just a loss for Spain, it's a shift in the entire prestige of the tournament. Instead of the trophy being synonymous with the White House of Madrid, it becomes the private playground of the Granata. By 1960, Torino has won 3 of the first 5 European Cups. The UCL isn't a Spanish legend, it's an Italian one. The Real Madrid myth is strangled in its cradle, and the Spanish giants spend the 60s trying to figure out how to beat the Italians, rather than the other way around. Because Torino is winning everything, the transfer market of the 1950s looks completely different. In our world, the best players like John Charles, Omar Siveri, and Luis Suarez eventually migrated to Juventus or Inter Milan. In the Torino timeline, they go to the Philadelphia. They want to play for the Invincibles. Torino becomes a global all-star team, a precursor to the Galacticos, but built on a foundation of tactical discipline rather than just star power. The axis of football power doesn't just shift, it locks into place in Turin. One of the most tragic what-ifs of Superga isn't who died, but what happened to the style of the game itself. When Torino's team was wiped out, Italian coaches didn't just lose their players, they lost their nerve. They looked at the loss of their supermen and concluded that without elite, once-in-a-generation talent, they couldn't afford to play attacking football anymore. They felt vulnerable, they felt exposed. This fear gave birth to Catenaccio, the chain, the ultra-defensive, boring Italian style that prioritized a 1-0 win over everything else. For 50 years, Italian football was defined by the lock. It was a style born of trauma, a defensive crouch designed to prevent another catastrophe on the pitch. But if Torino survives, Catenaccio never becomes the national identity. Because Torino's attacking sistema keeps winning, the next generation of Italian coaches don't look for ways to hide from the game. They look for ways to control it. Imagine a world where total football isn't a Dutch invention from the 70s, but an Italian one from the 50s. Coaches like Nereo Rocco and Helenio Herrera, who in our world were the architects of the defensive bolt, would have been forced to innovate offensively to compete with Torino. Italian football becomes known for its fluidity, its high pressing, and its goals. The tactical evolution of the sport speeds up by 20 years. The beautiful game becomes more beautiful sooner. Think about how that changes the history of the coaches you know today. Men like Arrigo Sacchi, who revolutionized the game in the late 80s, wouldn't have been seen as a heretic for wanting to play attacking football in Italy. He would have been seen as a traditionalist, following in the footsteps of the 1955 Torino archives. Pep Guardiola wouldn't be looking at Johan Cruyff and Ajax for his primary inspiration. He'd be looking at the tactical blueprints of Ferruccio Novo. The very DNA of modern coaching is recoded. Let's fast forward to today and look at the world through the lens of this alternate 2026. First, look at the city of Turin. In our world, Juventus is the global giant with the futuristic stadium and the J brand that sells jerseys from Tokyo to New York. Torino is the scrappy underdog, the club of the people with a tragic past and a dusty trophy cabinet. In the alternate timeline, the roles are completely reversed. Torino is the global billion-dollar brand. The southern migrants who moved to Turin in the 1960s to work for the Fiat factories would have made a very different choice. In our world, they chose Juventus because Juve represented the future and the winners. In the Torino timeline, they choose the Granata. Torino's 10-year dynasty in the 50s would have cemented a fan base that spans the globe. Torino is the club with 35 Scudettos. Torino is the club with 8 Champions League trophies. The old lady Juventus is relegated to being the other club, the West Ham or the Espanyol of Turin. And what about the tragedy itself? Without the crash, the Basilica of Superga is just a beautiful church on a hill, a place for weddings and tourists, not a site of solemn pilgrimage. The Granata shirt isn't a symbol of what could have been, or a relic of a lost generation, it's a symbol of what is. The air of melancholy that hangs over Italian football is gone, replaced by a century of uninterrupted confidence. The death of the Grande Torino didn't just kill 31 people, it killed the momentum of an entire nation. It shifted the axis of football power from Turin to Madrid, and eventually to Milan. It changed the way the game was played, coached, and remembered. It turned Italy into a defensive fortress, rather than an attacking powerhouse. When we look at the modern landscape of football, we are looking at the scars of 1949. We like to think that greatness is inevitable, but history tells us it can be unmade by a single patch of fog. The Grande Torino remains the greatest team to never fulfill their destiny. They are the "what if" that haunts every Italian football fan, the phantom limb of a sport that was forced to grow in a different direction. They were the team that was too good for their time, and perhaps the universe decided they belonged to the heavens rather than the pitch. But for those who know the history, the 1950s will always belong to them. In a parallel universe, Valentino Mazzola is lifting the European Cup under the floodlights of a packed stadium. The Philadelphia is the loudest, most feared ground in the world. The Invincibles never had to die to become immortal. They earned it with every whistle, every press, and every goal. They didn't need a tragedy to be remembered. They just needed 10 more seconds of clear sky. What do you think? Would the Grande Torino have actually stopped Real Madrid's 5-peat? Or was the rise of the Spanish giants an inevitability of history? Could Italy have really won 5 World Cups before the 1970s? Let us know in the comments. This is a debate that has lasted 70 years, and it isn't ending anytime soon.